Hey everybody, this is AJ Ali. I'm back for another episode 4 of Love is the Answer. The podcast is helping to improve police-community relations and help each other learn how to love each other in general. I'm here today with my dear friend and contributor to the Love is the Answer book, Nat Alston. He's going to come in a second. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then I'll go ahead and bring him in. Nat Alston often describes himself as a millennial in a baby boomer's body. His background includes positions in law enforcement, hospitality, healthcare, food distribution, nonprofits, and financial services, starting out in entry-level positions and finishing his corporate career as a vice president of human resources. Then he began his consulting career, and now 19 years, maybe 20 years later now, it has been a human capital consultant to over 30 different clients in the areas of business coaching, strategic human resources, leadership development, executive search, public speaking, and succession planning. That's something super important for all of us that we need to talk about. The organizations that Nat has had leadership positions with include the president of the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources, and I know he's chairman now, and the former national president of UMGC, National Alumni Association. He was one of the founders of the NAAAHR and is currently the chairman of its National Board of Directors. His public service includes member of the Howard County Equal Business Opportunity Commission and once served as chair of the Maryland Governor's Commission on Ex-Offender Employment. We got to talk about that too. He has been a past associate member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, otherwise known as NOBLE, and the Association of Campus Law Enforcement Executives when he was chief of police at Bowie State University. I'd like to welcome Nat Alston. Hey, Nat, how you doing, man?
I'm fine, AJ. How about you?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. It's always good to talk with you.
Same here. Always looking forward to it.
So let's jump right in, man. Nat,
okay.
You're one of the 29 contributors in the Love is the Answer book. I'm gonna hold it up so people can get a glimpse of that.
And I thank you very much for allowing me to be a contributing author, a contributing writer to the book. It was indeed an honor and a pleasure.
Man, I'm just happy not only that you're in it, but that you're in my life. We've known each other for a long time, but I've really just gotten to know you over the past several years, and it's been an amazing journey. I've learned a lot. I feel like you're an Obi-Wan Kenobi to me, and I'm just trying to soak up everything I can, man, so I can live my best life.
Okay.
So I admire a lot about you, but one of the things I admire most about you is your dedication to your bride.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've been married 25 years, 364 days. Our anniversary is tomorrow. That'll be number 26. So it's so fitting to have you in on this call today, because I'm wanting to learn more about, okay, how can I be better as a husband in year 26 than I was in 25? So what's the most important lesson you've learned in your married years, and who taught you that lesson?
Well, before I even answer that too, let me give you some background. I think I've got some degree of knowledge in that this coming August 15th, and I always say too, those are dates that you got to remember. You remember your bride's birthday, which is December 29th. And you always remember the anniversary, which is August 15th. So nice. I can forget any other days, but those 2 days are locked in my brain. So, and they've been locked in my brain. Coming on now, this August 15th will be 49 years.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah, we're getting hit that threshold of the big 50 next year. 2021 will be 50 years, but 25 years and 49 years. Back to your question. One thing that I will say to you that has kept our marriage going over these years is that my bride, my wife, is my best friend. I've had friends, you could call them so-called friends, that have come and gone. best friends in my wedding and whatever. I've reached out to them, but my bride truly is my best friend.
Mm.
And that to me has been something that's been a thread and a hallmark through my marriage, our marriage. I love being with her. We don't mind, and we're friendly people, don't get me wrong. We are very friendly, outgoing people, but we enjoy each other, and we can be alone, just the two of us, and have an absolute ball. So part of that is she's my best friend. I enjoy her company. We give each other space, absolutely. And I think that over time you evolve and you have to give each other space, because as you mature, you do pick up different perspectives. And now that she's retired and I'm still on a consulting side, there's a new relationship there, because the time that you're now spending together, you're not raising children, the empty nest is there. So we rediscover, and we try to, as much as possible, go out to places and go away, just the two of us, and reconnect. And we've done that over the years, where we certain times of the year, we will say, okay, it's time for us to get away, and get away from, hate to say it in one sense, get away from people.
Yeah.
And it's just the two of us.
I can relate, brother.
Yeah. So that's the fundamental thing. Having her as my best friend, my confidant, bounce things over. As you said during the introduction of the bio, I've changed a lot of jobs. I've had a lot of jobs in there, and being that so-called millennial in a baby boomer's body,
I love that.
She has been right there, steadfast, and been supportive all along. And I think that's been one of the keys in there. I'm one of these people that didn't mind taking the risk and changing jobs, even change locations. But she's been right there. She's been that right steady rock, and I could always depend on her. Yeah.
That's awesome. I can feel when you two are in a room together, I can feel the bond. Mm-hmm. That's evident, and the love that you two have for each other is evident. And that's one of the things that I've learned from you in the years that I've known you, is that can be something that other people can feel, and so if you don't have that closeness, that affection for each other, that friendship, people can feel that too. That's evident as well, right? So I really work hard. I feel the same way. My wife is my best friend. I got some guy friends who are that I'm close with, right? Like yourself, and and William Peach, who's also in Columbia, and some other folks who I'm close with. Mm-hmm. But Jane is my ride or die. That's right. So I can relate, man.
And those are the people, no matter what you go through, you know they're going to be there. Yeah. And despite what others may think, say, or whatever, when you come back home, you've got someone in your corner. That's right. And over, like you said, now the coming back to the 26 years that you've experienced having a good relationship with Jane, 49 with us. Hey, it's basically been I tell her all the time, this has been a great, great ride. Mm-hmm. And I've said to people during the course of my career, AJ, when I've been interviewed by people and they're asking me, well, what would be the best thing or thing that you would classify as your greatest accomplishment in your life? I don't hesitate. My marriage. I don't hesitate at all. I don't even get into the career. Yeah. My marriage. And I shared with you some time back that I came from a broken home. Don't mind sharing that. Did not have that relationship with my mother and my father. But once I got married, I committed to my wife and particularly the children, letting them know that, hey, this is how it's going to be. And I always tell my son and daughter, my son now is 45, my daughter is 44. And I always say to them, do the math. We've been married now 49 years, you're 45. Guess what? That means you were wanted. Yes. That was not an accident. You were wanted. both of them. And there's a comfort in that. And I know my wife, on the flip side, to AJ, her parents, before they passed, they were married 55 years before my father-in-law passed. And I said to my wife, Mary, one, you know how it is having mom and dad together. On the flip side, I don't have that experience. So now I've got to create that. And I've got to pass it on to my children. And so they pass it on to their children.
So Nat, let me ask you, man,
Sure.
because my parents split up when I was really young, and my father was very abusive. He was an alcoholic. He beat my mom. He really hurt her, and he hurt us as well. In other ways. My brother took the brunt of physical abuse from him, as far as us siblings go. But the mental abuse was definitely there. The emotional abuse.
Right.
I didn't have a roadmap, and it doesn't sound like you had one either, right?
I did not either. Did not either.
So, yeah, that was for me. This is my second marriage. The first one, I shouldn't have gone down that path at all. But we do have a very beautiful, wonderful, incredible daughter out of that relationship, and I was not ready for that, and we weren't the right people for each other. But we have brought a wonderful human being into the world, but I didn't learn lessons that would help me to have a strong marriage until 7 years into my second marriage.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so, so my second marriage, with Jane, which has been 26 years now, almost blew up, as a result of me trying to make up a roadmap as I went and making all the wrong decisions. So what was it like for you and Mary in the early days?
It was this way, AJ. One, it was similar to you. I had a major adjustment with Mary's family and with her. And I say that because she was one of 9. And I was one oldest of 3. She had her family all married, and her family, as far as her mom and dad, had been married all into about 20 plus years or so. And each of her siblings, they were very, very close. And they still are today. And that's something that took, I tell you, it took a lot out of me to get used to it, because I was not used to having Christmas with the family. They had that. They would bring the siblings and all. So really, back to your question, Mary and her family taught me how relationships should be. I questioned that in the beginning, like you would not believe. During the Christmas holidays, Mary, and she still does, with the siblings, would exchange gifts, or she and her sisters, it was 3 brothers and 6 girls, and they would even pass down clothes, and I couldn't comprehend that. Why would you let your sister, why would you let your sister wear your outfit? Because I didn't have that. I was the only boy. My sister is 3 years younger than me, and I got another sister by my father's half-sister that is at least 6 years younger than me. So I didn't have all that, where she had all this wholesome relationships with her siblings. They ate together, they played together, they were on down in Southern Maryland, La Plata, and they were all together all the time. And they carried that even to their marriage, and even today. They've carried that on. We've got, when I go back and look at, when you say 49 years, I'm in the middle of that, of her siblings with 49 years. We've got 2 that are over 50. And then the next one is 2 over 50, couple that's in the 40s, and the one in the 30s. So it's longevity, and they got that from their mom and dad. And when I would see them interact during the holidays, or when we go down there for as various picnics or just socializing in general, that camaraderie and that togetherness was a learning tool for me. Yeah, I rebelled against it a little bit because I didn't know, like you said, I didn't have a roadmap, and I'm going, why do you guys do all this crazy stuff? But as time went on and we had children, and her siblings had children. The cousins came together. It became more and more of a learning tool, more and more of a cultural shift for me. And I would tell my children, similar to you, I didn't have a roadmap on how to be a father. I had an idea of how to be a father and how I wanted to be in my children's life because my father wasn't in mine. Yeah. My mother and father separated when I was 3. And I basically was raised by my grandparents, and I say raised, yeah, to a degree, but looking back at it, hindsight being 20/20, I was basically housed. They put a roof over our head, but I didn't really have strong role models even between my grandparents. So I really learned a lot more. And Mary, when she looks at this, she'll probably smile. I learned a lot more from her family and the interaction between her siblings and the spouses than I did far as anybody else. And that has given me that roadmap, if you will, on how I'm going to raise and develop my children, be involved in their lives, because I didn't have that, and I wanted to flip that switch and get involved in theirs.
Awesome. Awesome.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So I mean, that's the whole thing, and when you look at it too, I did a flip, and we'll talk about it too. One of the projects I'm working up with you and the school system up in Ypsilanti, I put together what I would call, quote unquote, a little miniature TED Talk, and it was titled a guide for Black fathers on raising their children. And I won't go into more detail, but at the end of the TED Talk, I asked my son and my daughter to give me their insight as to how they felt my involvement was and is in their life.
Okay.
And each of them went on, they did about a 7-8 minute video on how I was involved and what it meant to them. And it broke me up. I mean, we're talking about grown adults who have their own children now, and I'm asking them to reflect. They did, and it choked me up because that was something that I told them, you say what you want to say. There's no script. Here's the premise. How was I an influence on your life growing up and now? And that was it. And they had a 6-minute video. Each of them did a 6-minute video on that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah. So I have that on tape now, and as I said, the plus that I love about it is modern technology. I can keep that.
Yeah, that's right. Jane and I were just talking about tomorrow popping in, looking at old photos, but also popping in the video that was taken last year by our friend and neighbor, Stephen. He goes by Brownie. He's an actor out here, great guy. And he gifted us with a video of our renewal of our vows. And so we're going to pop that in tomorrow and check it out.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So look, we're gonna talk about marriage and relationships a lot, during our time together.
Sure.
And the book, of course, the writing that I did is based on 25 things I learned during the first 25 years of my marriage.
Okay.
And so I know we always laugh when we talk about that, right? Because we're just getting warmed up. We're still newlyweds. You're like, you've been married twice as long as us. I'm always a little sheepish when I talk about anything I learned in my 25 little tiny years of marriage, to you. So, but we have a lot of fun, talking about that. And that's another thing that I enjoy, being an athlete, having been in a lot of locker rooms of banter between guys. It's usually not wholesome talk about how wonderful marriage is. It's
right.
There's a lot of talk about, messing around and just, seeing what you can get away with and all that, man. I never was into that. So in talking with you, and we have a good time talking about how can we be better husbands, fathers, grandfathers. you know, that's some good stuff right there.
Yep.
You ain't never getting rid of me, man. I'm
No.
always.
Same here.
So this whole marriage thing, you know, we base the book on, okay, well, if certain things can work in a marriage, you know, like learning how to give each other that space that they need, and, you know, being honest while being loving, you know, and fair, and helping to lift each other up during tough times, you know, well, then we got to thinking, well, can those things be applied to the police community relationship? And it's really the same principles, all the principles that go into a healthy marriage can be applied to the relationship between police and people of color. Yeah. And that's something that we're, you know, you and I are trying to do around the country. We'll get into the work that you're doing in Ypsilanti and elsewhere, you know, as one of our master certified trainers, and, you know, just really, really in the trenches and at the 30,000 foot level. You've really been a great contributor to this movement. Before we get into that, though, I want to let people hear a little bit from your contribution in the book, your story. If you'll read a little bit of what you wrote.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what I'll basically do is really look at it from the, I guess you could say from the beginning, when I got started in there.
Okay. Hey, can you hold your, you know, the part up where it has the title of your work? Can you hold that up? Can people? Oh, no, the title of your chapter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Hold up a little higher. I don't know if it's, oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Officer to officer advice.
Right.
All right. So I don't want people to miss that. So
okay,
you're not only the chairman of National Association of African Americans in Human Resources. You've not only done a lot of consulting on the corporate side, but you've also been in law enforcement.
Yeah, and I think, AJ, when I read and looked at the other contributors to this, I guess I bring a different perspective, even in the law enforcement arena. And reason why I say that, even though I didn't spend but maybe 10 years in it, and also I had my undergrad was in law enforcement, the fact that I looked at it from a different perspective because I was in 3 different levels of law enforcement. And I've shared that with you and shared that with when we were showing the documentary Walking While Black, because when you start looking at that relationship between law enforcement agencies, and I've shared that again when we showed it at IPSI. I worked on a campus, which is a different law enforcement culture. And that was at Bowie State College, which is now Bowie State University. I also worked on a county level, which would be to a particular jurisdiction here nationwide. There's about 3,000 counties in the United States. So you've got a county perspective. And then the beginning of this was working in a state police perspective. So when you look at the levels of law enforcement, to me, on a federal side, if I moved up to another level, it could be maybe on the federal agencies, the FBI, Secret Service, or something of that nature on the federal side. Then you got another level, the state, the local would be the county or the city. And then you got another branch under that would be now with campus law enforcement, where the colleges and universities have full-fledged police departments.
Yes.
And I don't know if you knew, if I shared that with you before we go into the book. When I got to Bowie State in 1977, they really didn't have a police department. They had a security department. And at that time, during that time period, a lot of campuses, particularly here in Maryland, were petitioning or going through the state legislature to get that bill, get bills passed, giving that particular university or college full law enforcement authority.
Okay.
Where they could be their own police department. When I got to Bowie, there was only about maybe 4 or 5 universities and colleges in Maryland that had that, University of Maryland being one of them, Morgan State University in Baltimore being the second. Bowie didn't have that. So I basically, during that time, and fortunately, again, it'll connect both parts, but I came on and then immediately started a drive and got legislation, draft a bill, got that bill introduced into the Maryland State Legislature. And that bill was House Bill 1987. And it's in the archives now, in the state archives. But that bill was passed. I testified for that bill and got it signed by the governor. And we were then granted full law enforcement authority. We were granted a police department at that college during my tenure.
Okay.
And that gave really a whole different aspect of terms of recruitment, terms of law enforcement, from a campus standpoint. And now when you look at various campuses out here now having their full-fledged police departments, particularly in Maryland, Bowie back in 1977 got that when I was down there as their chief of police. So,
wow, that's cool.
So back to your point and reading this, and when I look at the state police, as I mentioned, my first experience, if I may, was building bridges in the community, began in 1969. And if I can digress a little bit, I was the first African-American to join the state police from my community.
Mm.
And my community at that time was in Baltimore County, and it was an African-American community called Turner Station. And as I mentioned in the book here, I became somewhat of a local celebrity in there because I was the first of that community to join the state police.
Now, did everybody applaud that decision, or was that something that
they didn't applaud it, AJ, and it was more of a curiosity, if you will. And that was probably most of the reason they looked at that was strange and curious. I remember while I was going through the academy, no one really knew, because going through the academy, I stayed in the police academy in Pikesville, and the only time I came home was on the weekends, and basically I was in civilian clothes. So it really didn't hit them until after I graduated from the academy, full uniform, and got assigned to a particular barracks, and then got into my car. At that time, the first couple of weeks or couple of months, you had to use your own personal car to go to that particular barracks. But when I got out of the house and came in, got into my car, and people were going by and seeing me in full uniform, many of them got shocked and was just ultimately surprised as you don't know what. And it added more to it is when the day that I got assigned, because in Maryland, in the state police, you got assigned a police car. And when I got that Maryland State Police car and parked it right in front of my grandparents' house, because that's where I was still living, and people were riding by there and saw state police, first thing they were saying, well, who's in trouble? But when they saw the car constantly staying there and I was getting into it, that was I guess the shock or the reverberation throughout the entire community. So that made me feel proud, as I said in here, made me feel proud of my accomplishments, and along with serving as a resource of inquiry. Being a resource for the community, I was able to provide a role model to others to pursue a career in law enforcement. And so the community had one of their own, and I became a source of pride. That became some of the people in the community really felt proud. And I remember one in particular who was a Baltimore County police. And this was an older gentleman. He was one of the few African Americans who served in the Baltimore County. Well, when he saw me in the state police, he really was absolutely just beaming. You thought I was his son, adopted son, in that community. So yeah, that was really something that I really took a great deal of pride and respect in. And being at that time, even though I was the first one in my community, I became only the 10th African American to join the state police at that time. There was only 9
Wow.
before me, and I became number 10. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So really, it was very much a joy being in the state police. And, you know, I have down here, although I didn't patrol the community, I knew what I brought to the community and made sure that I visited each neighborhood of the community so they could see me as an asset, not as a liability, but an asset, a source of knowledge and understanding the aspects of law enforcement. And I wanted to bridge the gap between the community knowledge of law enforcement with the realities of the job. And I became a part of many discussions focusing on the aspect of law enforcement. I became somewhat of the spokesperson for the state police there in Turner's. I would ride around and just stop, and people would ask me questions. How was it? How did you survive? How did you make it through the state police? So what do you do? What's a typical day? So I became somewhat of that information piece.
Okay.
From that standpoint,
Okay.
yeah. And that was a
Awesome.
sense of pride.
Awesome.
Yeah, very much so.
Hey, we're back with Nat Alston, episode 4 of the Love is the Answer podcast. And it's been a wonderful time. We're going to keep things rolling. We're going to get into the L.O.V.E. in Love is the Answer, that acronym. Nat, the L, of course, in Love is the Answer, you know this better than anyone, stands for learn. What have you learned in your marriage that can be applied to police community relations?
Yeah, that when you pose that question, that's I know what I've got as far as my marriage, but in terms of police community relations, I would say one, as I mentioned to you earlier, being a best friend. And I think really as far as law enforcement in there, particularly on a local level, let's have that police community relations can be more of a friendship, a relationship with each other. As I mentioned, when I tried to do in the state police in my community was be an asset and not a liability. So people would see me, and I think this was a little bit before I got married, but once I got married too, I still became that asset in the community. And taking that honesty, taking that, what I've learned as far as being a best friend, as far as my bride, you can do that same thing in the police community relations aspect of it too. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that in the book too, when you talk about PAL, the Police Athletic Club. And I mentioned that at the end where Baltimore City and others would have a police athletic club, and that police athletic club was letting people know that those police officers are human too. Mm-hmm. And that also they wanted to build that relationship. So you saw a police officer maybe in uniform, but then on that police athletic club, you saw the police officer as just a regular guy, regular person. And the same thing, hey, you've got a marriage in there. You want to be open, honest, communicate, and be that best friend for that person. So on a local level, yeah, that's what I think I've learned, and how that can be transferred over to the police community relationship.
Awesome. Awesome. So the O in Love is the Answer stands for open your heart. And of course, opening your heart leads to empathy. How does empathy help a police officer become a better peace officer?
Well, when you say empathy and all, you know, it's almost similar to what the Native Americans used to say, be able to walk in my shoes. Mm. And if I got empathy in there, if I know the community and know who I'm dealing with, particularly if that person, and I go back to what we're doing up in Ipsy, if you're a police officer and you're dealing with a person or a group of people that may not have strong fathers, hey, I understand that. I can walk in their shoes and be able to empathize. And really, when I say empathize, I can say to them, I can relate to you. I've been there. I know what you're going through. I know what it's like not having a father that's going to be there to support you and really, in some cases, discipline you when you need it. So yeah, being able to relate, being able to understand that we all have our idiosyncrasies. We all have a pathway, a road that we've traveled that may be similar to other people's roads that they're traveling. And so that O meaning open up your hearts, but also open up your mind. Open up your heart and the mind to understand that, hey, there are people out there that are just like you. The only difference may be the color of their skin, but they may be going through the same road that you're traveling. But the only way that you're going to open that up is open up, you said, your heart, but also open up your mind and open up your mouth to share that experience.
Yeah.
I take that O a little bit further than just the heart, but open up the mind and open up your mouth and speak.
Yeah, we see time and time again, right, where, in fact, one incident just happened where there was a police officer beating a man, and his partner was just standing there and just letting him wail on this person. And then finally, after about 33 seconds, the partner, you know, she put her hand on his arm as if to say, that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why couldn't that have happened after the first, 3 or 4 blows,
And see, AJ, when you look at that, you start thinking, and I would challenge people to start really being critical of that particular incident and the framework of this. That police officer that was there probably could have been a senior officer, had more time on the job. And that other officer could be a rookie. You don't know. But you start really peeling back, as I always say, peel back the banana or peel back the onion. What made that person watch for 30 seconds and then stop saying that's enough? Or why didn't she or he interject in the beginning? Hey, we don't need to do that. But then you start thinking, okay, from the police standpoint, I've been there. That police officer say, well, why did you butt in? And why did you stop me in the first place? Or she felt that maybe it wasn't her part to do it in the beginning. So there's a lot of issues going in there. And when we shared your movie, the documentary Walking While Black, and you start thinking about all those issues coming in from that police department, and that's where I go back to opening up your mind, open up your heart, but also open up your mouth. The more you start talking about the perspective of that law enforcement culture, and that's one of the things that I've taken in terms of training a different viewpoint when we show your movie, the documentary, different than maybe my other law enforcement colleagues who were in a particular department or the particular agency for all of their lives. I've seen it on different cultures, and I shared it in the book here when I left the state police and went to Prince George's County. And once I went to Prince George's County, that culture was totally different. That culture of law enforcement, where in the state police, it was more esprit de corps and a high degree of professionalism. In Prince George's County, it was not during that time. And I said in the book also, it was during a time that the quote unquote Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood movies was being shown. And so people got that machoism, and you recruited people on the job, and as soon as they got in there, that badge became a license, taking the L word in a different context, to do whatever they wanted to do. So they didn't open up their minds, didn't open up their hearts. And so you got different subcultures within those law enforcement agencies. So when going back to your point, when you start seeing that, and that police officer watches while the other one does the brutality on that, you start looking at both sides of the coin, the person, but also both officers. Why does he have to assert or abuse his authority on that person? And then why does the person, or what caused that person to sit back and just watch it for a period of time? You start analyzing all of that. What's going on in his or her mind? And then what's the trigger for her, in this case, to put the hand on and say, okay, enough already. Like you said, why didn't you say we don't need to do that in the first place? It may end up being that field training officer or this particular police officer having more seniority than the other person, and this is what he feels that he can do. Then you look at also the dynamics of gender, male, female. The male officer versus the female. Female officer may not have taken that route. And I've seen it. I've seen where that male police officer, particularly when I was in both departments, state and county, where, okay, I got the badge, guess what? I'm now playing Batman. I'm gonna enforce what my culture or my upbringing. I'm the man, and I'm gonna do it. So you got that.
So as you're saying that, I'm trying to recall, how many instances I've seen of a female officer doing something similar to that, and I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, you have a hard time thinking about, bringing that up.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm sure that there are instances out there, but I can only remember maybe one or two. But I can recall dozens of incidents.
And see,
with
here's the other thing that I say too, that you and I've discussed too. When I was in the state police as well, and at Bowie, but particularly in the state police, I also was what got me started in human resources was in personnel of the state police. And I started recruiting people for that. So I also took that, and when I started analyzing that, and now looking at my career in human resources and understanding that there's different cultures depending on the level, also depending on who I recruit on the job, and what baggage they bring to the job. And when I say baggage, yes, every officer coming into that law enforcement operation brings his or her own baggage, their own views, their own biases, whatever. And if there's a culture there in that police department, as it was in mine in Prince George's County, and even the state police wasn't immune to it in Maryland back in 1969. It was not. It had its seed of racism in there. Prince George's County had that in there, but also Prince George's County had a sense of brutality in there at that time.
Yeah, they had quite a reputation.
Had a reputation. And so when you ask that, how did they get that reputation? Part of that reputation is the type of people that they recruit on the job. And then once they get them on the job, the next part of it is who creates that culture. That culture starts from, and now being a consultant in it, it starts from the top down. And then it also is embraced by middle management. In this case, it's the lieutenants, it's also the captains, the majors, and even the sergeants, that field training officer. So we break it all down in terms of how and who creates that subculture within the police department or that culture in general. And
who's the most influential in terms of the rank structure? Is it your partner? Is it the training officer? Is it the chief? Is it that lieutenant? Who's the most influential person when it comes to creating that culture within a department?
Within that department, in my opinion, I think it's basically one starts with a group, the field training officer. But once that person is right there on the patrol, it's that either that corporal or that sergeant.
Okay.
Right there, that immediate supervisor.
Okay.
That's the person that has the most influence because he or she is out there with the rank and file every day. Whether lieutenant or if it's a first sergeant rank, depending on how the hierarchy is set up, that person, the higher you go up, AJ, like in anything, the more administrative that job becomes. So if it's a lieutenant, yeah, he or she is out there, but that's more administrative, that's less field work. But that sergeant, that foot sergeant, that's the person out there. And what I found out in both police departments, going through their training academies, once I got on the field, I had people to tell me, hey, forget what you've learned in the academy. This is how we do it.
Do you think that that's normally the case? Is that something that is happening all over?
Oh, I think it's still there. I think it's still there too. I think
Forget everything you learned in the academy.
yeah, the academy basically gives you the laws and here's how it's going to be and that structure, and because they've got a controlled environment. And you've got sometimes the rank and file looking at the academy and say, well, yeah, that's the academy, that's out there. They give you the ideal. This is how it really is out here. And I'm not saying that now you can't get cynical, because that's what you experience on an 8-hour shift. But at the same time, like you said, with Prince George's County and here in Maryland or across the board, civilians need to ask, hey, what's the reputation of that police department here in this city, in the county, and whatever? And do you hold them accountable? I want to go back and find out, okay, where are you recruiting these people from? How are you recruiting them? And when we joined the state police back in '69, and the other law enforcement agencies are doing it, we had a psychological inventory. You know, were you psychologically ready for this? And that depends on the budget. So you've got other agencies out there that are not that sophisticated in their hiring practices. So they will bring on anyone. And really, when you look at the history of law enforcement, who do I bring on? I bring on people who are like me. And the more I bring on people who are like me from a certain ethnic group, a certain neighborhood, or certain whatever, part of the country or part of the county or part of the state, and what their cultural beliefs are, particularly when we talk about police community relations, we're talking about really black and white or black and brown versus white. Where's that white police officer coming from? Does he live in the community? More than likely he does not. Is he?
Yeah,
no.
We interviewed a former Baltimore City police officer who, a white guy who shared with me that a lot of the new recruits were coming from Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania. And you know, the only thing they really knew about black people was what they saw on television.
That's it.
And would come into the city. And I don't know if it's still being done or not, but he was pretty graphic in his description of what was happening. And you know, they would come in, do their job in the way that they thought they needed to do it, and then go home and then go back to Pennsylvania. But it was like an occupation.
Right. Let me interject, AJ. You're absolutely right. They came in there, in my opinion, and I've heard it from a lot of officers in there, to survive. Let me do my 8 hours to survive and go back home. And I'm going back home to rural Pennsylvania. And then I'm going to be very critical of my city. I was born in Baltimore, but I'm critical. I still do not like the idea that if you go outside of this city, outside of this area, and I've gone overseas, and you probably the same way, gone out of state. You mentioned Baltimore, and two things come up: The Wire and what?
Well,
homicide. Homicide on the street. Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, that
people
too.
remember The Wire, and what does that? How does that portray Baltimore? It's not a positive image.
Right.
But you got to look at Baltimore, not just that's a result of decades of neglect and all that's happened in the city. So you're right. Here comes Baltimore City. They cut out the police athletic clubs. Those things to me were making tremendous progress because they were in the neighborhood and people could see. So if you ask me, how do you change that? You bring back the police athletic club where you encourage that police officer to get involved in the community outside of the uniform. Where I
don't see that happening. I see things like surveillance planes being approved. So they're videotaping everything, everyone, what they're doing. That's a big debate right now. I don't know how they even got that passed, but instead of putting boots on the ground where you've got hundreds of officer friendlies out there doing their job, certainly fighting crime, but also building in the community. I don't see them going that way now. I see them going the other way.
No, and what you said earlier with that drone and surveillance aspect, as you said, I'd rather police now 5,000 feet up in the air instead of having 5 inches of boots on the ground, where I can get to know the person, understand that neighborhood, understand what's going on in that neighborhood through police community relations, getting involved in the elementary schools, getting involved in the middle schools. If you ask me the question, how do you turn it around? I said this to a client unrelated to law enforcement. You got to look at this almost like a sports team. You got to start now when they're in elementary school, building up that trust where they can see you. And it's going to take a long time. This is not a short-term fix. It is a long-term fix. We didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight. But you've got to commit a long-term strategy of bringing back, if you're talking about surveillance cameras, then all right, double that and say, let me put some police athletic clubs back into the elementary and middle schools in Southeast Baltimore, Northeast Baltimore, Northwest, and whatever. And that's just not in Baltimore. That's in any city. That's in any city. Yeah. In order for you to start making that difference, you got to go back into the neighborhood. And as I said in the state police, have somebody that's got the courage to go into that neighborhood, recruit somebody out there, give him or her the support so they can be a resource of knowledge and experience. So someone else can say, you know what, that's a very good job that I can take on. I can be a very good law enforcement officer.
So when you were in your roles in law enforcement, I know just because of the kind of person you are that you went above and beyond and you did things in the community. I don't even need to ask you if you did that. I know you did that. Mm-hmm. What was it like for the community members when they saw you going above and beyond? Now we're getting into the V, which is to then volunteer yourself to be part of the solution in someone's life. So when community members see a peace officer taking the time to learn about their needs, when they see that officer opening his or her heart to the people in the community and having empathy, and then going one step further with that mind and that heart knowledge and putting it into action and doing things above and beyond, what does that say? As a peace officer, when you were doing that, what kind of response did you see from the community?
What I can remember one in particular, not just in Turner's, but we were down in Annapolis, and I was talking to Annapolis and the community center down there with the NAAACP. And back to your point, what did I pick up? First of all, I would say I had to listen. And I did that even in Turner's and any community outlet that I was there. I was doing recruiting for the state police, wanted to make sure that the community viewed me as a resource. But when I got in there, AJ, basically I went into a hostile crowd, and it's going to be a hostile crowd even now. But the first thing that I did was say, hey, I'm here to listen. So I'm going back to not just a volunteer, but back to that L word. Listen, listen to the community. What are their concerns? And then taking those concerns back, not just to recruitment standpoint, but to, in that case, the barrack commander or that sergeant that patrolled that, meeting with them and say, hey, these are the concerns that they have. And here's this upside of this. We want to go into this community, and I want to at least recruit 2 or 3 African-Americans or people of color from that community. We got to turn this around. But also recognize, and I told the community people, when you volunteer and go up and beyond, it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So when you volunteer, it's not just I'm volunteering for today, I'm volunteering for a long term. I use an analogy all the time. I said, I was never a sprinter in high school. I was a marathon runner. I ran cross country. And when you run cross country, basically that's 2 or 3 miles. So that's endurance. So you've got to go back to your question. You got to go in that community, not just once, not just twice, but on a consistent basis. So you can build up that credibility, build up that trust, build up that respect. So again, you hear them, you listen to them, you show what you said earlier, the empathy that you have, because what they're sharing with you in a lot of cases that I can relate to back in Annapolis is the same shoes that you walked through or was experienced just in a different neighborhood. So you've got to do that.
Yeah.
You've got to do that. You've got to volunteer. But when you volunteer the same way that I'm volunteering to do this up in Ypsilanti, I made it very clear to those folks up there, this is not a one-shot deal. We signed this agreement with you a couple of years ago. We've shown that movie, and I use the documentary, but we've shown that movie at least 10 times up there. And we've got now a youth center up there, Educate Youth, who is a 501c3 right there in Ypsilanti. And we've said to them, we want you to show it to your students. You fall under the licensing agreement that we've signed with your organization. You're in Ypsilanti, you're in the town, and you're educating African-American youth between the ages of 12 to 18. And part of that education is showing this documentary, Walking While Black. And so the police department there will know about it and they can participate. So you volunteer, and my volunteer efforts have paid off. We've got Educate Youth. We've got the police chief involved in that now. But
the chief's been to almost every screening, correct?
Every movie, every time we've shown this movie, he's been there. The chief of police of Ypsilanti. So it goes back to your point of volunteering. Volunteering is not a sprint. It is a marathon. You got to volunteer, and particularly if you're trying to build credibility, you got to also volunteer on a consistent basis.
Now, I want to go back to the chief for a second, because people need to hear this. There's going to be a lot of people in law enforcement watching, listening to this podcast.
Okay.
And we've been all over the country with this film, which, film came out in 2017. It was revised in 2019. 35,000 plus people have seen it. Dozens of police departments have used it. Very rarely do I see the command staff participating fully in this process of not only the film being watched, but also the Q&As and the workshops and the discussions that have to go deep, the time that it takes, the follow-up programs that we set up in different cities around the country. But when I do see that happen, like Bobby Kimbrough, for example, the sheriff in Forsyth County, who's got a great role in the film, like the chief in Ypsilanti, who's been to every screening. When I see that happen, I see it making a tremendous difference.
It does.
Not only from the standpoint of what the community sees and reacts to. Hey, the leaders are deeply interested in this, but I also see that flow through the entire department. That now that it takes on another meaning, like this is something that is worthy of investment. And just to back up a second, you were responsible for Ypsilanti becoming the first city in America to have a lifetime citywide license to this film. And I deeply appreciate your work there and the partnership with the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources. The continuing work that you're doing there in Ypsilanti has been amazing. And I've seen that firsthand. I've been there to participate in one of the events. I've seen the difference that you're making. I encourage you to keep going, but I also want to encourage other departments around the country to do what that chief is doing, do what that department is doing, and make it that marathon instead of a sprint, because we go into a lot of places and they just want to check the box. We showed the film. Okay, that's that. Let's move on to the next box and get the next box checked. But we can't, we can't accomplish anything that way. It's
And
got to be a marathon.
right. And that's the key point. I've said to the chief, I've said to the city leaders, folks, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And you're hitting it right on the nose. In order to change the culture and in order to change the relationship, as you said, between police and the community, it has to start from the top and then go down. And that's basically how you look at it even in corporate America. And I've been on both sides. I've been on the corporate side. As you said, I left corporate America as a VP of HR. When you're in that arena at that C-suite, you can affect policy, you can affect change. When they see that as a approach coming from the chief, but also I would say to you, again, incorporating the chief, rank and file. You asked me who's the most influential. We want to get those sergeants in there so the chief can make that change from the culture down, but that sergeant or that field training officer can understand that. You weave that into their training. So that's a comprehensive standpoint. And back to your point, checking the box is not going to do it. Again, this is a culture change. This is a sea change. Just like we're going through now this pandemic and things, the new normal will be different. Unfortunately, we don't have, this was uncontrollable or we didn't predict this is happening, but that's going to be the new normal. And that's a sea change. That's what's got to happen in law enforcement around that. We've got to see people who take your movie as a catalyst for change. And they've got to see that from the top down, and it's got to be integrated into those police academies, as you basically wanted to see it done. It's got to be integrated also for police recruitment, accountability, exercise, so let's see stronger police community relations. So all that's got to happen at the same time, and making sure that that police chief says, folks, we're committed to this for a long term. As I said to the chief in Ypsilanti, this is at least a 5-year, 60 months commitment that we're making, that I'm making. Because anytime that you want to affect a change, and this is what I counsel my clients and when I talk to business leaders, to me, to change anything, it takes about 5 years to really cement that change and make a true, real difference. Not 2 months, not 2 years, but at least 5 years to really make it solid, and that this is going to be a staple. I want to see, like you, Walking While Black, a staple in that training, recruitment, reevaluation, in-service training, whatever, so they'll know that this is a staple, just like they have to have laws, knowing the laws of their particular state, the laws of their particular county. They can incorporate this into their training, because again, coming from a different perspective, coming from 3 different law enforcement agencies, 3 different levels of it, being in HR, dealing with human capital, I bring a different perspective and understanding the culture. This has got to be integrated, AJ, into the overall training if we want to see a difference made in police community marriage relations.
Absolutely, brother. I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why we went further than the film and created workshops, and then we went further than that, and we have the book that everyone needs to read your chapter. This book is now something that once people see the film, or even if they haven't seen the film, they can form their own little book club. You know, whether it's 10 or 20 people from a department and 10 or 20 people from the community coming together, maybe once a week at a coffee shop when we're able to gather again, and talk about the 3 chapters that they read that week, and what does that mean for them and their community. There's opportunities now with this 482 pages for people to go deep into this subject in a way that can be uplifting and transformative. And and not just finger pointing and being angry with each other, but truly learning about, the things that we must do to make things better.
Yeah, that's you're absolutely right. That's the whole point. And as I said earlier, you're talking about love is the answer. And you're talking about love is the answer as it relates to marriage, as it relates to relationships. It is not something that just happens. You've got to work at it.
Yeah.
I love my bride of 49 years. It is just something that just didn't happen. I have to work at it even at 49 years and consistently working at it. But there's an ultimate understanding that this is where I want to go. This is where I want to be. I want to have that love all the way through, that it goes through my body. But I know, as you said earlier with you and Jane, you got to work at it.
Yes.
It just doesn't wake up in the morning and go, boom, I'm here. No, it wakes up and you said, wait a minute, I've got to demonstrate. I've got to show that, hey, my commitment, I've got to have that behavior that shows that, yes, love is the answer. It opens up a lot more doors than close. And that's what we've got to do. I've said that to the chief. We become very close friends when I come up there to see him. And I want to continue that relationship. So again, by the fact that we've both been there, he can learn from me and I can learn from him. And we can learn from each other. So back to your love. Open up. We both open up and shared. And we've shared our thoughts and ideas about who we are as people. I know a little bit more about the chief, and he knows a little bit more about me. We both are married. We both have traveled. So back to your L volunteer, we're volunteering a lot more up there. He's opening up and volunteering. And then your E, the empower. We empower people to take those extra steps, to get more involved in making a difference. As I said to the people in Ypsi, I could have easily, after our conference, gone home, packed up my bags and said, okay, been there, check the box, AJ. I'm checking the Ypsilanti box, gone. No, we decided to get involved again with this city. And now the E, like you said, we're empowering people to what? Get involved, contribute to making a difference there in Ypsi. So back to your L.O.V.E. Hey, love it all the way, and it is the answer.
Amen. And, you keep referring to the work that has to be done and the time that it takes and sticking with it, and made a reference to, even after 49 years of marriage, you still have to work on it. You still have to tweak it. You still have to fine tune things. And it does require work. And we've got to be willing to put that work in, all of us. I'm not saying just police. I'm not saying just community members. I had a pastor of a Black church where we showed the film once tell me that he's tired of being the one to reach out, that he's not going to do it anymore. And neither are his pastor friends, that it's up to the police to then reach out. But, maybe the reason why I wasn't invited back was because I told him that it's really, we really can't stop reaching out. We have to be willing, no matter how we're being treated, no matter how many times we've reached out.
Yeah.
We've got to keep doing that no matter what. And, some people aren't ready to hear that message. And I understand why, because there's been great pain and a lot of division and a lot of systemic oppression and racism in this country, no doubt. But even so, we've got to keep reaching out. If we don't, we know what's going to happen, right? And so this love that you and I are talking about, Nat, this love that we preach, that we put into action, it's not just warm and fuzzy. It's not that way. It requires those steps to be taken, that work to be put in. And that's why we developed a roadmap for people to follow. And I see what's happening in Ypsilanti. I can't wait till we can duplicate that in dozens more cities together, and and get people to do the work. And there are some really fine folks around the country that we are working with, in Dallas with the Dallas County Community College District, in Howard County, Maryland, with the president of the state NAACP, Willie Flowers, and retiring Major Luther Johnson of the Howard County Police Department, who I know is a friend of yours as well, and so many other people around the country that are willing to put the work in, and we're seeing the results. And
I can't echo what you said enough. And I say it all the time, this is a marathon. 26.2 miles is a marathon. You've got to be able to put the time in and understand. Back to that pastor, and he said getting time. Guess what? When you run a marathon, or you run 3 miles or 2 miles, you're going to hit a brick wall.
Yes.
And people talk about that. Marathon runners talk about hitting that wall. And the key point is, are you mentally prepared to go beyond that wall or go through that wall? I mean, again, I go back to my cross-country days here in Maryland, running the 2 mile and the 3 mile. Guys were over running that 100-yard dash or the 200, 220. They were over in 20 seconds or less than that. And I'm running it probably in 10 minutes or so. Or here now, a person running a marathon in 2 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours. But the perseverance, this is not something that you turn the light switch on and turn it off and that's it, you check the box. To the pastors, to anyone, if you want to see better police community relations in the United States or in your community, you must sign on for a marathon. If you're not capable of doing that or not willing to do that, I understand. That's the empathy. I understand. But if you want that change and want to make it better, and AJ, I say this to you and I both as grandparents, I got to do this because I want to leave that legacy for my grandchildren, my 14-year-old grandson. I want to make sure that hopefully that he doesn't run into what my son did when I talked about in your book, The Talk. And people, if you ask an African-American male who has an African-American male son, all you have to do is say, do you know what the talk is? And all of them will agree. We're not talking about the sexual talk. We're talking about the police talk.
That's right.
So why we do it? Hey, I did it for my son. Now I'm doing it for my grandson and all the other sons and grandsons that are out there. And again, I would challenge that pastor, whoever he or she is. Hey, you didn't give up the pulpit, then why don't you, and you're still there, the same thing, it makes the same thing here. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a journey that we must continue on.
Absolutely.
And put in that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brother, it's always good talking with you.
Same here, AJ.
And, I don't know, are you still doing the early morning workouts?
No, I'm not. I'm basically here stuck in the house and all. I'm doing some exercises in the house, not as much as I used to, but as they say, age is catching up on me.
Well, then you better keep running, man. Don't let it catch up on you.
I can't let it catch up with so much, but I'm out here trying to stay as active as I can.
How can people get a hold of you?
Well, if they want to get a hold of me personally, the phone number first is area code 301-437-6758. And I have 2 websites. My public speaking website is very easy. It's Nat Alston, NATALSTON.com. That's the public speaking one. And my consulting company is the Horizons Group. And it's www. Horizons, HORIZONS group, GROUP.net.
Awesome. I like to end with some word association.
Okay.
You know, we've been talking about some heavy subjects, but we're going to end it on a lighter note, man. Yeah, this may be the harder part for you.
Yeah.
I'll give you a word. You tell me what comes to mind. We'll just do that through 5 or 6 words, and then
Okay.
we'll begin to wrap up. You
Okay.
ready for this?
Yeah.
Police.
Community.
Community.
Yeah, community.
Okay. That goes back to Sir Robert Peel's saying that forged the foundation of policing, right?
Yep.
The people are the police and the police are the people.
Yep.
One and the same.
Absolutely.
All right. Next word. Peace.
Love.
Next word. Love.
Calm.
Next word. Bride.
Again, love.
And last one. I don't know if you have any hobbies that take up a good chunk of time. Mine would be golf, if not for this and for a bum leg that I'm trying to fix. So hopefully one day I'll get back to that.
Before I would say that, if you ask me, it used to be softball.
Softball.
Yeah, I played softball and really softball, baseball. If it wasn't for slowing down and having these my legs and all, I would still be out there. So softball would be that. Yeah.
And so what is it? What is it now?
Now watching it and really involved in my grandchildren and particularly my granddaughter.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one.
Right.
My youngest one is right around the corner, less than 5 minutes. So she's the apple of my eye. Spending time with her.
So you're living it out in many ways with the work that you're doing with the NAAAHR, with the work that you're doing in the community, with your family. You're putting love into action.
Got to, and your book really has added another dimension to it, if I may put it in that perspective. This is the first time that I was a contributing writer to a book. I admire and really think the world of you to take the opportunity to write a book. I want to say this, that's what I want to do, is write my book. And my road, and I've got the outline. So to really be a contributing writer to yours has spurred me on and got me a little jump start to say, hey, I need to write my book.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
that is awesome.
I'll be knocking on your door asking you to write the foreword for it. So I'm looking at some key people that I want to have what I call the influencers in my life. And you're one of them.
Thank you, my friend. I can't wait to read that book. That's going to be a hit.
Well, I hope so. Hope so. AJ, I want to say this before we close too. 2 words. Thank you.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Yeah.
And when I say thank you, fill in the blanks. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Thank you for allowing me to be a contributing writer. Thank you for being a part of our association and our strategic partnership between your organization, Love is the Answer, and the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources. Thank you for your vision of putting this documentary together, the film together, and thank you for all that you're doing to make a difference.
Man, I appreciate that. I appreciate you. And let's keep it going. We've maybe run 5 or 6 miles of this particular marathon. We got a long way to go. Let's keep encouraging each other and keep going down that path.
You got it, sir. Will do.
All right. So for all of you who have been tuning in, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. And just remember, love is the answer. Let's take every opportunity we can to learn about each other, to open our hearts, to volunteer ourselves to be part of the solution in someone's life, and to empower others to do the same. You can learn more about our work at loveistheanswermovement.com, and hashtag #TryLoveNow will get you to our social media sites on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm AJ Ali. And thank you so much, Nat, for being my guest today on the Love is the Answer podcast.
Thank you, AJ.
All righty. Aloha, brother.
Aloha, AJ.
All right.
All right.
Peace out.
Peace out.